Good evening, I'm Amirul Aiman. Here are the top stories for tonight. After a decisive parliamentary vote, Thailand's Anutin Charnvirakul has been elected Prime Minister, and US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to lower tariffs on Japanese cars. That and more coming up on AWANI International. Anutin Charnvirakul has been elected as the new Thailand's Prime Minister on Friday, ending months of political deadlock with a decisive parliamentary victory. Backed by the opposition, he secures more than half the lower house votes, defeating Pheu Thai's candidate Chaikasem Nitisiri. The result dealt a heavy blow to the Shinawatra family, whose party has dominated Thai politics for 2 decades. Charnvirakul, leader of the Bunjai Thai party, is known to be a conservative politician. He secured enough support to be Prime Minister only after agreeing to a demand from the Progressive People's Party to call for a national election in 4 months. At 58, Charnvirakul has worn many hats: Deputy Prime Minister, Interior Minister, and Health Minister, and earned attention for his handling of COVID-19 and efforts to decriminalize cannabis. Meanwhile, Pheu Thai said it would complete all pending policies for the Thai people and is ready to serve in opposition. United States President Donald Trump has signed an order lowering tariffs on Japanese car imports and other goods after months of negotiations with Tokyo. Japanese autos will now face a 15% tariff instead of the current 27.5%. The changes are part of Washington's trade pact with Tokyo, first announced in late July.
The deal also confirms 550 billion US dollars in Japanese investment for US projects. Products with lower tariffs will now face the 15% rate, retroactive to early August, although aircraft and parts are exempt. The agreement is a relief for Japan's auto industry, which employs about 8% of the country's workforce. Toyota alone estimated nearly 10 billion US dollars in losses from the tariffs. Meanwhile, South Korea is watching closely, with its own deal expected soon. An agreement with Washington would cut tariffs on Hyundai and Kia imports from 25% to 15%. Markets reacted cautiously, with Japanese automaker stocks edged higher, while South Korean shares slipped slightly.
Stay tuned for more after the break. Welcome back. United States President Donald Trump is directing that the Department of Defense be known as the Department of War. He is expected to sign an executive order on Friday, allowing the Pentagon to use the name as a secondary title and for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to be called Secretary of War.
Hegseth is also tasked with outlining steps to make the change permanent. The Pentagon carried the War Department name until 1949, when Congress adopted defense to reflect a Cold War strategy of deterrence. Changing the name again will be costly and require updating signs and letterheads used not only by officials at the Pentagon, but also military installations around the world. Since January, Trump has pushed a series of renaming initiatives from military bases to the Gulf of Mexico. Hegseth recently reversed former President Joe Biden's plan to rename 9 Army bases. The bases had been named after Confederate leaders linked to slavery and racism. Trump and Hegseth said renaming the Pentagon as the Department of War is meant to promote a warrior ethos.
US President Donald Trump has reiterated that he will soon impose substantial tariffs on semiconductor imports from companies that don't move production to the US. Speaking at a White House dinner with tech leaders, he said firms investing domestically like Apple would be spared.
Also at the dinner were Meta's Mark Zuckerberg and Oracle's Safra Catz. Trump, however, did not specify a timeline for the tariffs. Last month, he proposed a 100% tariff on imports from companies that don't invest in U.S. manufacturing. Apple has pledged an additional $100 billion for domestic production, adding to a $500 billion plan announced earlier this year. The U.S. has been working to onshore its semiconductor supply chain for years, with major players such as TSMC and Samsung committing hundreds of billions to building plants in the country.
A federal judge has blocked United States President Donald Trump from unilaterally cancelling billions in foreign aid approved by Congress. The ruling issued late Wednesday by Judge Amir Ali in Washington orders the administration to comply with appropriations law unless Congress itself changes it.
Ali said the White House cannot refuse to spend around 4 billion US dollars of the 11.5 billion allocated for 2024, which is set to expire on September 30th. He also noted the administration offered no valid reason to bypass Congress's authority over the budget. The Trump administration quickly appealed, with the White House spokesperson insisting this would not be the final word. She argued that Trump has executive power to ensure aid is accountable to taxpayers and aligned with his America First agenda. If upheld, the order would prevent Trump from canceling funds largely directed to the U.S. Agency for International Development, an institution his administration has already scaled back.
The Israeli army claims it now controls about 40% of Gaza City after its latest offensive pushed troops closer to the center. The army says its offensive has captured key districts, including Zaytun and Sheikh Radwan, and that operations will intensify until Hamas is broken up and hostages are freed.
Meanwhile, Israel's chief of staff told cabinet ministers that without a clear post-war plan, the military itself may end up governing Gaza. On the ground, health officials in Gaza reported at least 53 people killed on Thursday, mostly in Gaza City. Emergency teams accused Israel of striking homes and crowded areas, saying evacuation warnings have become meaningless because nowhere is safe.
COP30 President Ambassador Andrea Correa do Lago said Southeast Asia's model of regional cooperation could offer lessons for global climate talks, urging countries to focus on solutions and just transition strategies ahead of the UN summit in Brazil.
ASEAN is an example of a group of countries that together try to solve problems that they can have in common and identify opportunities. And the COP is about that because many people think that the climate change meetings are about the problems only. No, it's also about solutions. It's also about how can we use everything that we already have negotiated to make sure that we advance in the fight against climate change.
Correa del Lago was speaking at the sidelines of the 18th ASEAN ministerial meeting on the environment in Langkawi.
This COP is going to have a very important negotiation on just transition. And what we must make sure is that countries find their own way of organizing this transition. Because for each country it's going to be different. Each country has a different circumstance. So this COP, among the most important things in the negotiation is going to be the concept of just transition. Why? Because if you don't make people's life better, people will not engage in this agenda. So as long as we have a just transition, I am very optimistic regarding the fight against climate change.
This week on Wu Says, we're kicking off on a new mini-series on the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s. The first episode takes a step back to look at the big picture, why it happened, and what the consequences were. Here's a segment from Melissa Idris' conversation with Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Wu Wing Tai.
So, I mean, that's a really kind of bitter pill to swallow, the fact that the lessons of the Asian financial crisis haven't we haven't actually acted enough on them in the US. And I want to ask you about here in the region. So, talk to me about the consequences of the AFC in Asia. What happened in Asia that, in hindsight, now you see did we learn the lessons here in this region?
Okay, two sets of lessons. One is on the economic side, and the other side, big change in the region is on the political side. Let us start with the economic side first. One thing we do know is that in a time of trouble, the only reliable source of help is self-help. In other words, no one's going to come bail you up unless you are an important political ally of a big power. For example, if that's why Suharto, when Indonesia got into trouble, Suharto expected the Americans to mobilize Japan and the IMF to bail out the Indonesian banks and saved him. Because that would not be the first time that Suharto was bailed out by the Americans. The Americans bailed him out in 1966. They bailed him out during the Pertamina crisis of the 1970s. And they bailed him out in the 1980s when there was a global slowdown. So Suharto knew that the US had his back. But what he did not realize was that 1997 was no longer 1983 or 1990, 1966. It's because the Cold War was over. They no longer needed Indonesia to be a staunch ally against the communists. That is number one. And number two, Suharto was very old. He was by about 80 years old. And so the Americans could see that his days were numbered. So they would rather support his successor than to delay the political transition. So they told Suharto, well, we are not going to bail you out this time. And when he heard this, Suharto said, if that is true, I'll be gone in 3 months. And he was right. He was gone in 3 months. So, in other words, if the global geopolitical situation change for a big important country like Indonesia, that changed the end of the Soviet Union and of competing ideology meant that the US don't have to spend money to bail out its friends because there's no Soviet Union who's going to come and take over that friend.
Catch the full conversation on AWANI International and across our social media platforms.
That report wraps up Awani International tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com and our social media accounts for more. I'm Amirul Aiman. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Bully di sekolah.